Welcome to episode 6 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart. This episode was taped on July 31st and will be presented in 2 parts. You're listening to part 1. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Lynn.
It's July 31st, and we had a very nice phone call last week for a podcast, but we had a terrible and tragic software malfunction, and we lost that recording. So we're going to try to cover some of the same topics that we did last time, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
And the topic was that going back to your interview with Kevin Michael Grace, you mentioned that the police, eventually they work to protect the criminals more so than the average law-abiding working class guy like you. And that when you were managing the store, you had good interactions with the police for the most part, that they would help you protect your business, but not so much as a resident, a pedestrian, homeowner. And you responded with a very nice outline, posted up on your blog, and the opening there was proximate force versus proxy force.
I realize that one probably comes from the other in Proxy Force. I'm just guessing, but Proxy Force probably indicates a force that you employ if you're the power broker that is in close proximity to whoever you want to influence with your force, with said force. So the Indians that the French hired to attack the English were considered French proxy forces.
Right.
We are living under an imperial scale government. They're much bigger than the Persian Empire, which as far as I know was the first experiment with a large scale multicultural government that enforced social norms based on the threat. The sword of Damocles coming down on you if you misbehave. This is inferior to the proximate force, as exemplified by Alexander taking only 34,000 men and taking down a 30 million person empire. He had, everywhere he went, he had the better force at the point of contact, and his decision-making chain, there was very little physical space between the thought in his mind to apply force and the guys 100 yards from him that were going to apply that force. So the conquistadors also, with a couple hundred guys each, Cortez and Pizarro take down the Aztecs and the Incas within a year both times. It was about a year and a half, I think it took for both of these.
Wow.
And these were effective militaries. People think the Aztecs weren't effective. They were.
If they just would have over all the other groups that were there.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why Cortez was able to be effective is, one, the man that was so removed from the scene that he was delusional, Montezuma, is relying on the threat of his will coming down on people, and he could have given the order, which his brother wanted him to give, just to wipe these people out. But he was superstitious, and this fulfilled certain prophecies that had to do with bearded people. And he wasn't on the ground. He wasn't the guy that should have made a decision. Cortez was able to make alliances with places like Tlaxcala. I'm sure I'm butchering that pronunciation. But this was a city that could field 100,000 men, and who the Aztecs had barely defeated, but they defeated them. Well, now Cortez now has a huge army, so he doesn't just get overrun by numbers, and he can use his guys as a strike force. The Incas screwed up in a different way. Pizarro didn't make alliances. He was allowed to have a direct audience with the 20,000 guys that ran the Inca Empire, none of whom brought their weapons, as their 80,000 man army sat outside of the city. They have the more powerful proxy force. They have all the power on paper, But Pizarro and his guys, who were literally urinating themselves, they were so terrified because they were so outnumbered. They had the hand right next to the brain. The decision was made, and they jumped on these guys. Hernando de Soto, who ended up wiping out numerous civilizations in what became the southern United States, he killed people all day long. I mean, this guy probably killed a couple thousand people in that one day. He's just riding around chopping up, chopping down, skewering, trampling these unarmed Incas. It would basically be all the senators and the representatives and the lobbyists and everything in our government.
So he was on horseback?
Yes.
And the other guys weren't?
They had some cavalry. He was one of them. He was, Pizarro led the mounted strike force. Soto led the mounted strike force for Pizarro. He ended up and the Pizarro brothers didn't like him, and nobody liked him. The guy was a maniac, but he was very effective. And, he learned this trade from the age he was 14. Nobody was more of a gangster than Hernando de Soto. Again, so you have, when you take Pizarro, Cortez, and Soto, these are all guys from, help me with the pronunciation here, Estra de Mora. It's on the border with Portugal.
Oh, maybe Extremadura?
Okay. This was a border area next to Portugal. These were warlike guys. Their land holdings were poor. These were the guys that went to the New World. They actually came from the interior of Spain, and they were descended from bandits who had fought against the Muslims when they ran most of Spain. And they didn't go with orders from the king. They got their own schemes together. And then after they took down these places, they would write back to the king for authorization to be the governor. And one of the things he would say, well please don't kill my counterpart, and please don't kill all the people. Convert that peacefully to Christianity. And here they've already burnt the guy alive.
Wow.
Oh well, he'll take it. This nation that's twice as large as his nation has just been handed to him, so he'll take it. So this would be like discovering, a planet nearby that was populated, and then just groups of mobsters and gangsters going there and taking these things down, and then writing back to Donald Trump and saying, "Hey, we just conquered Mars for you. Can I get the franchise here?"
Yeah.
And he'd say, "Well, hey, thanks a lot. You must be an all right guy if you could get this done."
Yeah.
These were gangs. This was not the Spanish military going out. Soto actually privately outfitted his entire expedition. Pizarro scraped things together. He got a bunch of allies together that were other low-level fixers for higher-level guys like de Villa, who was a total savage, and these guys all came up under him. And then the third way of doing it was just hijacking somebody else's mission. Cortez literally stole the governor of Cuba's mission from him. Killed and imprisoned his loyalists. He burnt the ships, so his guys couldn't even go back. And he was another one of these guys. He was a gangster.
All right.
And that's what these guys are. And that's what they were. And they couldn't unseat their king, not that they would want to, but they didn't have that kind of power. But once they got on the periphery, they were able to penetrate other places and affect a kind of moral colonization too, which in a way some of their descendants are doing now with MS-13 taking a lot of our business in the United States. They're dropping bodies on the I-95 corridor.
So
up here.
The analogy then, let's see, if we go to Baltimore and we say the gangsters are like the conquistadors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the police are like working for Montezuma. I don't know, what do we do with these guys? Montezuma thinks they're okay. Well, what about you, the law-abiding pedestrian?
Well, the police would actually be analogous to the Spanish officials. Okay. You know,
Even
and
less effective.
right, which means some of them would actually cooperate with the adventurers, and some of them would stand against them, like the governor of Cuba did. So they're kind of on the sideline. The point is the guys that have effective on the ground, around the clock force at the scene. It's not the cops,
No.
just like it wasn't the governor of Cuba. It's the gang.
But it could be
Of
you,
people
right?
doing it.
And the cops are stopping you from taking that effective stance.
Yes.
that you
Well,
could.
the point is, I'm still subject to. I'm not living a criminal lifestyle. I'm easy to find. I have a known address. I have a job. I have family. I don't have a bunch of friends in prison.
Mm.
So I'm still subject to the threat of the ultimate proxy force coming down on me if I defend myself. That's one aspect of it. That's the deterrence I have that the criminals don't have.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect of it is when the cops show up in any situation, whoever prevailed is the bad guy.
Yeah.
So if you successfully defend yourself against the most common threat, right now the most common threat is teenage boys, the oppressed youth.
Yeah.
That's your most common threat. If the cops roll up after, let's say, about 5 days ago, these two guys had a disagreement as to whether or not to attack me. The small guy balked, so the whole thing broke down. Even though the larger guy was telling him to get at me, I believe he wanted the little kid to grab me, and then the big guy was going to beat me, and then they were going to do whatever. Broad daylight, 70 yards from a primary street. There's a Hartford and White Avenue, right around it. And within sight of this, the whole time, there's a crew of 5 Mexican construction workers.
Mm.
If I prevail against these two guys and the cops roll up, since I did the most damage, according to the way our laws work, I'm the guilty party.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And then we use the eyewitness testimony is so important that if I don't mark up one of these guys and I only mark up the other one and the other one scampers off across the street, well, then he's just an eyewitness. He's not even an attack. It's not even part of it. So again, the system puts the screws to the law-abiding citizen. And the other part of it is the cop himself. When he's a young man, he's a coward. Usually, you have some super cops, just some guys that the other cops hate that are out there arresting people. And I've talked to a couple of guys like this, and they're cool people I can relate to. Most cops were emasculated. They were mama's boys. They were nerds. They were geeks. They were sissies. And they want to be a guy that wields some power. I talked to one tunnel cop who was not, which is a very limited type of police officer that works for a transportation authority, and they just police the Fort McHenry tunnel and the older tunnel that's right next to it, the Harbor Tunnel. His brother became a Baltimore City cop. And he said, my brother had never been in a fight in his life. Mm-hmm. He became a Baltimore City cop, and he can't beat enough people. He said he loves fighting. This is all he does. It's like putting a woman in an SUV or a car. Let a woman drive. You have this powerless, whiny, clingy creature, this soft little thing, that can't really, seriously, can't make it down the street by herself.
Are you talking about white Sharia? Okay, we can talk about white Sharia another time.
Okay. Well, the point is, when you take somebody that's used to being powerless and you give them power, then you immediately get a monster. A lot of your road rage stuff is started by women. Mm. Okay. So this is what a cop, when you give a cop a gun, it's like giving a woman a car. All of a sudden, she has direct access to this power, and she's also, in the terms of the driver, she has the justification of the greater society in terms of enforcing the laws of the road.
Yeah.
A lot of road rage is women screaming at people and picking fights with people because this other person broke a law or cut them off or something like that. Mm. And then with the cop, again, you have this person that's given power and they're given a certain type of justification. And that has lately that's been cut away from the police. The the idea that the powers above them are going to justify their actions has, to them, it's been taken away. But really, what it was is it was switched, and they're mostly stupid people, so they were slow on the uptake. when government favor went from favoring white people to favoring black people in Baltimore, for instance, the cops were still operating as if the government was going to favor white people instead of black people, which is, it used to be okay to be a cop and go, and you could beat up as many black guys as you want. You really weren't going to get in any trouble because your word was gold and his word was mud. Now, it's the other way around. If you're a white person, whether you're in uniform or out of uniform, you're the white devil. You're considered evil. You're a privileged person, even if you're a guy with, wearing 20-year-old surplus clothes like me that makes $140 a week. I'm still bathed in this aura of white privilege, and I'm the bad, evil guy. So the cops that are waking up have discovered that, hey, I can still beat people up.
Yeah.
You can't get away with beating all these black guys up.
The white guy.
Right, because if one of these guys dies, I'm toast. So if you put that together, the fact that the cops now know it's okay to go after Whitey, and if you're a white guy that successfully defends yourself and drops some hood rat in the gutter, you've also scratched the primal paint on this police officer, because he's a woman. I mean, this guy's a wimp. That's why he became a cop. That's why he had to join a 2,000-man gang and use guns against people that don't have guns. With infinite backup. If he keeps calling, eventually he's got 50 guys backing him up. If it gets bad enough, eventually he's got the National Guard backing him up. He's not going to lose.
Right.
Okay, so you take this guy that couldn't defend himself when he was a little kid and is now making up for it by being a cop, and the guy that it's okay to pick on now, the white guy, if that guy shows himself to be an effective combatant, one, he's already piled up evidence for you to charge him, and two, you hate and resent this guy because he doesn't need the gun and the uniform. He doesn't need the cop. So that's where we come in, and it's not just, it used to be my boxer Oliver would get picked up and harassed by cops every single week. He was an 18-year-old guy that had his own little cable installing business that he did, and he drove out of this bad neighborhood, which is where he could afford to live, and he's a confident black guy by himself driving a car. Usually the only time you see young black dudes in cars is when there's like 4 of them, and it's like one of the girlfriend's cars or something like that, or it's something that they carjack. No, so the police will immediately, when they see Oliver, they will type him as a guy that's a drug set leader, that's or an enforcer, just because it's so unusual to see a lone, confident young black man. That this is like the rarest thing in the ghetto, is that guy by himself that's confident. So that guy, even if he's a law-abiding citizen, he attracts attention.
Do they not learn who these people are like you would expect if he's been living in that neighborhood for some time, that the local cops would kind of remember that he's a good guy?
Well, they never believed he was a good guy,
Really?
and he moved out. He stayed there for about 1.5 years. He's an 18-year-old guy, and he's dating 30-year-old women, and he's running his own business. None of this stuff added up.
It doesn't fit in, with any of their expectations.
No.
Yeah.
So that's he came out to visit me at the store I managed, and this 30-year-old chick that worked the deli counter came out from behind the counter and asked me for his phone number, just because she saw him talking to me one-on-one like we were both men. Where even older men who were black men that worked for me, they would still talk to me like I was the slave master or the white devil or something like that. They were either playing me or they were being defiant. But when she saw that we were actually talking as equals, she's like, wow, this guy's great. Like it, he wasn't even bothering to play me. He came up there to ask for some advice for something. So the whole thing that makes police the overall thing that has the police come down on the side of the criminals in the end is just the fact that the police are set up to go after a law-abiding citizen. They have more leverage against him.
Yeah.
So if a law-abiding citizen organizes, and let's say all the guys on this block I live on get together and we start driving these hood rats off the street, well, then we've just made a big target of ourselves. We're something that we could even be investigated under the RICO statute.
Yeah, and you're challenging their authority, even if you're doing it for supposedly the same ends.
Yeah, right. See, they have a monopoly.
Yeah.
In the long run, if we're successful enough defending ourselves, we don't need them.
Right. We can't have that. You have a whole list here of really amazing stories. I think I've read some of them in some of your books, but
are we to that point now where we're going to get to the examples of the different guys?
Well, you had the low IQ, which I don't think we even talked about that last
Okay,
time.
well, let's do that, and then we'll break off and do the other one as a different segment.
Okay, okay. So we'll
the problem is with the low IQ people, when you're dealing with them, they don't want to go to jail. Mm-hmm. Yeah, prison's not as nasty for them as it is for somebody that's never been there. But most of these guys get beat up and raped, and some of them get killed when they go in there. They don't want to go there. Yeah. They're not going to walk in as the top dog. So the fact that low intelligence means a dull imagination means people that are stupid are going to have a hard time imagining the trouble they're going to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
Until it happens. Yeah. It's going to be a surprise to them. And this adds to the violent behavior when they do get in trouble because they're surprised or startled. They haven't thought it through because they don't have enough intelligence to have an accurate imagination.
Yeah.
That's what you need to predict outcomes is an accurate imagination.
Yeah, that's always referred to as future time preference.
Okay.
And amongst the, the Jared Taylor types, is that they can't. But I like your way of putting it. It's a failure of imagination.
Right. So these guys, they are not deterred by the proxy threat, by the large government program that pyramids down to apply pressure in this plotting long-range scheme. Mm. Like the law-abiding person is deterred by this. So you have the law-abiding person has the brakes on because they have an active imagination. They can predict that this is going to go badly for them. And this other one doesn't. But that law-abiding person, if he was unfettered, would be able to deal with this guy. You're never seeing alpha adult males for instance, from the black population. You never have alpha adult males attacking people of other races. Mm. Okay, they police themselves. These are the guys that police their own. Within the drug gangs and everything, the people that are attacking these, the guy walking down the street, these are teenagers that are actually trying to build up some street cred so that they can gain entry into the bottom rung of one of these organizations. And so many of these kids got vetted for membership in gangs through the Freddie Gray riots.
Yeah.
That's seen as the way you can make it now. Rather than start working on a corner, slinging dope, and getting shot by one of these alpha male assassins or one of these omega male assassins, one of these guys that's going to come by and kill you. Instead, you can go out and do some violence to people. You can make a little bit of money doing your robberies and all, and then you could apply above the corner boy position to get into one of these gangs and not have to be a target slinging dope out there on the corner like that. You can maybe get into transportation or enforcement if you build up enough street cred yourself, especially if you develop a record and you're in and out of lockup. So it's an alternative way that's not as passive and is not as hazardous as a traditional way of getting into the gang where you start out as the lookout boy and then you go to the guy that's standing there.
Yeah.
Okay, waiting to make the exchange. And that guy gets shot a lot.
Right.
And he gets robbed by guys who rob drug dealers.
Why does it benefit to be in and out of lockup?
Well, because it's a way to show that you're a criminal.
Oh,
You're willing to, what defines the criminal is he's willing to take risks that'll bring down the wrath of the government on him. And these people see themselves at war with the government over the same livestock. This is the wolves contesting against the shepherd and his sheepdogs for the flock. And that's how they see it. They use these street names because their name they refer to as a government name.
yeah.
And they don't want to go by the government name because right then it gets the government in your business and they're the enemy. So in a way, these criminals have a healthier view of the government than the rest of us do.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think, I mean, it would be nice if nobody ever really had to think much about the government, but if you think of it as a benevolent force, I never quite understand those people.
Most people think the government is here to protect their rights.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
make things safe for them.
Their natural rights. Thank you for listening to part 1 of episode 6 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart.